Kevork, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for
Oh,
being here.
thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, first of all, I have to ask you, are you able to actually speak freely, or are you worried about family members that are in Syria today?
So I can speak freely. I evacuated my family to a safe place, and soon they will be in a safer place, let's say. So I'm free to speak now.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you had to evacuate your family.
Actually, I did because I was very worried of them, especially that the groups who attacked the Damascus and they conquered it, they're not going to establish beds of roses, and they belong to Al Qaeda affiliate. And my parents, first things first, they are Christians, so I was worried about that. And secondly, I was worried that they would affiliate them with me because my face is famous in Syria and many people know me. And if they stop you on a checkpoint and they check your family name is Almassian, if they ask you, I mean, his father name is also Kevork, so if there's a high possibility that I'm his son. So I was very worried that they would harm my parents, therefore I had to evacuate them quickly on the same night that Assad fled the country.
Now, how does that work? Right now, you are in Germany. You're a refugee in Germany, one of the many, one of the million of Syrians that ended up in Germany from Aleppo. But the reports were after this fall of Syria to essentially Al Qaeda that Europe had actually halted asylum.
Yes. So I will tell this story for the first time. Nobody knows this, but the Syrian opposition groups and German NGOs and political parties and the press, they have smeared me for a long time in Germany. And they called me all sorts of names, and they succeeded to revoke my refugee status. This was a few years ago. And the German government even decided that they could deport me back to Aleppo, to my birthplace, because they said it's safe for me as someone who is opposing the so-called revolution, and they consider me supporting Assad back then, and they said, okay, go back to Syria and let Assad protect you. So if I was deported back then in Aleppo, I would have highly ended up now getting killed by these so-called rebels. So I don't have a refugee status, and I have a normal, just a resident permit in Germany. And I think now those who worked against me in the Syrian opposition to deport me to Syria, I think now the German government should ask them if they want to go back to Syria, because this is the outcome that they supported, that this HTS occupies. And when they fled to Europe, they said they're fleeing from Assad. So now Assad is gone. Syria could be considered a safe place for the anti-Assad people. So I think that this would be interesting to see how the German government is going to take a decision regarding the people who already have an asylum, because they have frozen new applications. But what about the rest? I'm not calling for deportation of anyone. Nobody should misquote me or misinterpret what I'm saying. But it would be interesting because the government of Germany tried to deport me in the past to Syria, saying that you have a certain political opinion, there is no danger for you in Syria. But now, since Assad is gone, if the German government would follow the same pattern of decision making, they should go after the people and say, okay, you fled from Assad, you said this in your application. Now Syria is free from Assad, maybe you should go back, because they're celebrating in the streets that HTS here in Germany, that HTS has occupied Damascus.
Isn't that so bizarre? I mean, this is an Al Qaeda. This is essentially Al Qaeda. I mean, what has happened? Uh,
No,
what
no,
do you?
no. It's not. It's not Al Qaeda, Kim. They rebranded it. They are now
Oh,
diversity
yes.
inclusive. They are now rebels. They are moderates. Even the leader of Jolani, who was part of Al Qaeda in Iraq, and
Hmm.
then he was the founder of the Al Qaeda offshoot in Syria. He was on CNN. And he said this was just a phase in his life. Like you go through a phase, like you become like an emo, and probably you know, like it was just a phase for him to detonate cars and kill people and slaughter them, basically. And now he's grown up, and he says like people change. So if Jolani can change, I think if he can sell this narrative to the Western audience, and this is backed by the CNN reporter who got surprise, surprise, an exclusive interview with Al-Qaeda leader in Syria. I think that the American administration and whoever is the handler in the US at the current moment, they are busy working to polish this guy's reputation, and they are presenting him as a rebel who's liberated Syria from Assad. But once he goes back to his former self, and he imposes strict, let's say, rule on Syria, or he discriminates against the minorities, or purges them, basically, then the US will have the perfect excuse to say, there are dangers now against the minorities in Syria, and we have to intervene to protect them. There is a responsibility upon us to protect them. So you bring a terrorist organization to power, and once they do terrorism, you say there is terrorism, and you come and to occupy Syria. This is how things work. I mean, we have been seeing this over and over and over again in the same pattern, and I'm very upset that people fall for it over and over again. It's like it's an open book for people to read and learn, as if like they either refuse to read, or even if they read history, they don't learn from it. Like how many times the people of the region have to fall in the same trap over and over again. But now those who supported HTS in Syria to come to power, then they have to live with it. And I don't understand, like I receive phone calls from friends who supported HTS in Syria, and they have a family now in Syria. They want to evacuate this person, their family outside of Syria. If you supported the HTS, why do you want to evacuate your family from Syria? It's crazy, just beyond me.
What do they say when do you ask them that, and do they have an answer?
And actually, I become very ironic. I say, like, day and night you're posting celebrations that HTS occupied Syria. Why do you want to evacuate your family from Syria? Like, they want to take them to Lebanon, and the roads to Lebanon is not so safe. So people do lots of, some people are hypocritical, you know, like they live in Germany, they live in the United States, and these are not only Syrians, the so-called pundits, Kim, you know them very well. How many of these pundits told us that HTS is now reformed and they have become like a moderate rebel group, but none of them dare to come back and live in Syria because they know their head will be chopped off. Therefore, they just promote this type of ruling over Syria or countries in our region, in West Asia or the Middle East, but they don't come or dare to come and live among us and experience this beautiful democratic experience that they're trying to normalize to the rest of the world. So I'm very frustrated. I'm not frustrated that Assad is gone. I have already made my position clear that he betrayed his people, and what he did is very treasonous. There is no excuse. It's unjustifiable. People trusted him that he will protect Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and people thought that by resisting all these insurgents and also the sanctions and living in dire conditions for a long time, that at least the outcome of this would be positive for them. So there was a resilience for the sake of a better outcome. But when he left the country that way in the middle of the night, taking only his belongings and his family out and leaving everybody basically behind him, people who trusted him, people who supported him, people who believed that this person is the symbol of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. But he failed on all counts by leaving people behind. And basically, there are so many acts happening in Syria right now, like revenge, summary executions, assassinations, and sectarian violence. And this entire Syrian army is now destroyed by Israel because there is no command of the Syrian army. So Israel says, oh, Assad is gone. Let's destroy all the strategic weaponry of Syria, missiles, air defenses, navy, tanks, everything basically, and turn it into, like, a, sorry for the expression, it's like a castrated country with no army basically, and bringing HTS into power. So he failed on all counts by leaving the country. I'm not sad at all that he left the country, but I'm sad to see the outcome, which I predicted for a long time. And accordingly, I was called like an Assadist, because I used to say, if there is a foreign funded insurgency, it's logic. We're talking just logic, 1 + 1. I mean, if these insurgents win the conflict, who is going to be the real victor? Are the backers of these insurgents, right? Because they're the ones who spend all this money. These insurgents cannot self-finance themselves. They don't have natural resources to finance themselves. Therefore, they rely on foreign funding, and the foreign powers will have the share of the cake. And secondly, I said that the insurgents are mostly, if not all, Islamists. Therefore, the outcome of this conflict, it's going to be an Islamist or a state. And secondly, it will be in the hands of foreign powers. And all these predictions were not like I'm a genius seeing the future. It's just logic. You can see Qatar, America, Israel, Turkey, and all these powers supporting these insurgents at the moment. Therefore, they will share the cake. And this is what is going to happen now into Syria.
Isn't it I have so many questions about what's going on there, but isn't it interesting that Israel's blowing up all of the military infrastructure? So here you've got the narrative of, yay, Assad's out, the brutal dictator who was promoting all these terrorists and funneling all these weapons to terrorists. He's gone. Well, why didn't they blow it all up while he was there? If they were so afraid of him and all of the weaponry, clearly they had the capability of doing it because they're doing it now. The United States, Israel, they're all bombing the place. Like, why didn't they do that under Assad? But they wait for him to fall. They cheer on the people who are there now, but then they, like you said, castrate them from having any sort of weapons. Like, as if that's not going to infuriate the new leaders of Syria. I mean, here you've got a group that's claiming they're going to be your friend. They've got no beef with Israel. They're fine, right? You've got Al-Qaeda saying this suspiciously. And now Israel is castrating them. I mean, don't they think that that's going to eventually come back to bite them?
Actually, I believe that if Israel tried to annihilate the Syrian army positions when Assad was in power, there would have been a massive retaliation against Israel itself. So they were, that's why they wanted for Assad to be gone, because all these weapons are stored in Syria as deterrents against the Israeli expansion in the region. Because Israel is an expansionist country. And accordingly, Syria has a strategic weaponry to deter further advancement of these Israeli occupation forces inside Syrian territories. And the proof of that is now, when Assad was gone, and nobody wants to fight against Israel, all the weapons were annihilated. And Israel, like in a few hours, they were already advancing inside Syria, and they are 20 kilometers away from the capital of Syria, Damascus, occupying all the higher hills. So they have like a beautiful observation points. They can spy on everyone. And the Israelis are celebrating it. They say, formerly known Syria, it's now Israel, and we're going to celebrate and party there. Like, it's a sick mind that they just can't occupy any other country and then wonder why there is resistance against them, why there is violence and armed struggle against them, because you guys want to expand and create greater Israel, not only the greater Israel within the borders of the current Palestine, but rather expand to Syria. Therefore, people want to have weapons to protect themselves. Now, the weapons are gone. Right? HTS says their priority is not like to open a front against Israel. They don't want to have anything to do with Israel. Now they have a priority to destabilize the country. But in the future, who is going to supply weapons to HTS, right? I think this is going to be Turkish weapons. This is going to be from NATO countries, and everything that you can sell to this group, like they sell to the Lebanese army, you have to write in the contract that you're not allowed to use these weapons against Israel, basically. And HTS is under Turkish control and Qatari control. And if anyone understands the ABC of the geopolitics in the region, Turkey and Qatar are not enemies with Israel. They are cooperating together in the region. Were it not for the Azerbaijani gas passing through Turkey, 40% of Israel's war machine cannot function, because 40% of Israel's fuel comes from Azerbaijan passing through Turkey. And in exchange, Azerbaijan gets weapons from Israel and ethnically cleans the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's like it's a very good business among themselves. And now Turkey is going to have the upper hand over Syria, especially in the north, and they're going to force a formula that this country doesn't have an army, just a police managing its own affairs inside domestically, just like the Palestinian Authority in West Bank. They don't have an army, it's just a police. So it's going to be intelligence and police, completely castrated. So even if HTS wants to open a front against Israel, they don't have any tanks or airfields or strategic weaponry to fight against Israel. And if they do fight against Israel, Israel will have the perfect, and like it's like going to be, the carpet will be rolled for them to enter Syria, because there is not the HTS is not going to be able to fight with four-wheel Toyotas and some basic stuff. They have no chance against Israel.
Yeah, I mean, this does set up Israel for the future of being able to take even more land in Syria, taking and creating their greater Israel project. One thing, what's going on with the Kurds? So this is kind of an interesting dynamic, because the U.S. had been backing the Kurds. This Al-Qaeda force has been fighting the Kurds, but backed by Turkey. And Turkey's against the Kurds. The U.S. is with the Kurds. This group that's now taken over is against the Kurds. But the U.S. is with the Kurds. What are we going to do with the Kurds?
That's a very good question. I think there is always the intention to keep the country destabilized. So if there are forces like HTS fighting against the Kurds, that's perfect. You can sell weapons to both sides. This is number one. Secondly, I think that when any group comes under existential threat, if the Kurds come under existential threat by HTS, again, this is an opportunity and not a misery. In the minds of the US planners, they don't see miseries as miseries. They see it as opportunities. For example, when ISIS expanded in Syria and they were selling the Syrian oil to Turkey, Turkey is a NATO country. So they were receiving cash money and they have become like an independent economy in Syria. So they expanded in the country. The United States saw it as an opportunity, not as something that they have to only counter, but rather for them to have a foothold in Syria. So if there is ISIS, you come to Syria and establish military bases to fight, quote unquote, terrorism. This is what they did. They came to Syria with the pretext of fighting terrorism, and they occupied the oil fields and the wheat fields. And eventually they have weaponized the food basket and the energy basket against the Syrian government, so that the Syrian government would be weakened, and also the people would be impoverished, demoralized. And this was all happened in the past 5 to 6 years, when Trump imposed draconian sanctions and he stole the oil, so the people don't have any natural resources to rebuild themselves. So this is the result now, that even the Syrian military was so demoralized because they don't have, basically, they can't secure the basic needs of their families. So why would you fight, right? This is also the psychological reason why they do these sanctions. So in this case, if the Turkish-backed HTS is going to attack the Kurds, I am highly confident that this time Israel will present itself as savior of the Kurds. And Israel already has a project of extending between the Golan Heights, opening borders in Al-Tanf border crossing. Al-Tanf, Americans occupied. So why the Americans occupied, I have spoken about this in length, and I said this is for the project of the Greater Israel. They're there, stationed, and they will allow a corridor for the Israelis between Al-Golan Heights to Al-Tanf border crossing, all the way to the eastern shore of the Euphrates, to open a route between the Kurdish enclave in eastern shore of the Euphrates and Israel. So this map is already being spread on Israeli accounts, saying that they have to open up to the Kurds, they have to protect them. I'm all for protecting the Kurds. And the Kurds are essential part, an integral part of the Syrian society. But if Israel is going to do that job, it's going to do it for their own benefit, in order to pave the way for this Greater Israel project. Because remember, if we see what is the Greater Israel project, it starts in the Nile, and it ends in the Euphrates River in Syria. So on the western shore of the Euphrates, it has to be the Zionist state. But on the eastern bank of the Euphrates, what is the entity that is going to occupy according to the Zionist theorists? It's Kurdistan. They say it. So if they have a Kurdish enclave or an entity or political entity there, and they open up channels with them, this will be again one step ahead or forward to achieve the Greater Israel project.
I mean, I have to be honest, I think they're eventually going to get it. I mean, I don't know how we stop them. I mean, this is.
I came to this conclusion yesterday, and I said, look, as a political analyst, I have to be honest with myself. I think that the Israelis have weakened the Palestinians to the maximum level. They have completely annihilated their infrastructure and any aspect for human dignity and life in the Gaza Strip. So I would not consider that a victory for the Palestinians. I think that the Palestinian factions are weaker now in Gaza, not stronger. And Israel received unlimited support from the US during this conflict. And then secondly, I believe that Israel has achieved a strong blow against Hezbollah by assassinating all its leadership. And no analyst can convince me that those basically the main brains behind Hezbollah can be replaced, could be replaced on the long run. However, without a supply chain for Hezbollah, now that Syria is occupied by HTS, Syria used to be the main supply chain of weapons to Hezbollah. So where are they going to receive their weapons and ammunition? So Hezbollah will become eventually a local player and a political player instead of being like a strong military, let's say, power against Israel. So basically, Iran's allies in the axis of resistance, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, basically weakened a lot. We have Hezbollah's entire leadership is assassinated. And I'm talking to my Lebanese friends and they say, like, we have had enough. We don't want to come to support of the Palestinians to open a front again against the to support the Palestinians because we lost a lot. Now we have to take care of ourselves. So they are in a really dire situation as well, and Syria is completely gone. So I think the axis of resistance then is gone forever. I don't think that Iran is able to revive this axis of resistance. And I want to mention this, be very honest. Today I saw a tweet for Khamenei basically saying that the Syrian youth will re-liberate their country again from these insurgents. And I hope that he would not have any hands in this. I hope he would not fund any groups in Syria to liberate our territory again, because people have put lots of, I would say, confidence in Iran to come in support of the Palestinians and support of Hezbollah and support of Syria, because this was a war against the axis itself and not against these players individually. But Iran didn't increase its participation in this war, and it has preferred its national interest, which I'm not blaming them. But if you're going to be the leader of a coalition, it's expected from the leader of the coalition to weigh in, like the United States did when the Israelis were in dire situation. But if Iran cannot weigh in and protect its allies, then there shouldn't be an axis of resistance. There shouldn't be big infighting and destruction to our countries, and for Iran then to back off and protect its own interests. That's not, in my opinion, it's not okay. It's not okay at all to pay all these prices, and then Iran under Pezeshkian, then they decide to open up ties again with the West and back off, because if Trump comes to power, I think the Iranians think that Trump will freeze the conflict in Ukraine, and he will hyper-focus on Iran, because they can't go to war against China, let's be honest, but they can destroy Iran if they want to. If they participate jointly against Iran, they could achieve massive destruction of Iran. So Iran sees this is also a time for it to take a one step back now and lead from behind. But I don't think that it has allies any longer in the region, especially in the Levant, like in Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine, to lead anyways. Even Hamas, they celebrated the regime change in Damascus. They said they're happy with the outcome. So I think even one of the players of the supposed alliance is running against the alliance itself.
Yeah, I think everybody's confused, right? I mean, but it is a confusing time of who do you back? Who do you support? Who do you cheer for? There were a lot of reports of, for example, Assad being, we've heard this over and over. He's a brutal dictator, gasses his own people. He had torture prisons in Syria. And I know a lot of the reports were made up. The West would make up stuff in order to get the public on board with regime change in Syria. And I've never been supportive of that, but I've never really had an actual viewpoint on whether or not Bashar al-Assad was brutal or not. I also don't think that, I think I'm lucky enough to live in a country that doesn't have Al-Qaeda or ISIS inside of it, taking portions of land, forcing, Sharia law on people. I live in a country that doesn't have that problem. So it's easy to look at another country like China and what they had to do with some of the radical Islamists in the Uyghur population, right? That were the main recruiting ground for Al-Qaeda, and the West was completely ignoring that and saying, how dare China, put them in these camps and re-educate them. And it's like, look, we haven't had this problem, but our government does. Our government thinks we've got a terrorist problem with January 6th, and look what they do to January 6th people. They still round them up and stick them in jails. Now imagine if they were actual Al-Qaeda beheading people or ISIS beheading people, then how would the population behave, and what would they demand of their government? So I don't judge like China or Assad for trying to crack down on this sort of radical, more radical Islamic terrorism or whatever, however you want to label it, rising up and cracking down on that somehow. I don't, maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe there isn't. I don't know. So I just kind of keep a stance of, I'm lucky enough to not have to have that problem. But I would imagine if we did have that problem in the United States, we probably would be cracking down on opposition, which is the people that are Al-Qaeda. We'd be cracking down on Al-Qaeda. We'd probably be rounding them up. We probably would be executing them, putting them in torture prisons. That would be, we do that in Guantanamo. We do that in Syria. We were using some of their prisons as black site, ops for black site prison camps like Guantanamo. So, but this idea, so Assad's out, people are supposed to be happy about this because he's gone, but then Al-Qaeda's in now. And I want to talk about Idlib because people are cheering on Al-Qaeda. You got the guy, like you said, Jolani going on CNN saying it was a phase. Could you imagine if we just let out all the gangsters in the US prisons when they're all older now and they say, look, I was a teen, I was in my 20s. It was a phase when I was going around gunning people down in the neighborhoods of Chicago. Like, give me a break. But now he's saying he's changed. But let's talk about Idlib because this is an area they controlled, that they have been, yes. What has life been like? Because they're saying, they came out and said, no women are going to be forced into wearing a hijab. They came out and said, no one's going to be forced. We're a Syria for everybody. But the areas they've controlled over the last few years kind of paint a different picture of what life is like under them. Their new prime minister that they have named, I guess, I know they've got Jolani as like the de facto leader, but Mohammed al-Bashir is now the prime minister. I'm not really sure how exactly
his major is Sharia. This is
right. Yeah, he has his degree in Sharia law, right?
Yeah, his major is Sharia. This is the guy who's going to lead the prime ministry. I'm not against him leading the ministry responsible for the religious affairs, but how can he be leading a ministry for the entire cabinet? Like, he doesn't have the competence, he doesn't have the skills. This is what we were fearful of, that the Islamists will eventually infiltrate all Syria's institutions. And rest assured, we will come to this conversation later, and I will remind you, the first thing they will put their hands on are the education. The first thing, they will go into the higher education and the elementary education, universities curriculum, and they will change the entire Syrian scientific-based education. Because in Syria, we mentioned Assad is an authoritarian, but the region has become into a really big dilemma. Like, people are in front of two choices. Like, it's either political authoritarianism, which respects all religions and sects and creates a secular system and also respects education, basically, and supports it, or we are in front of a theocracy. And many people have chosen to be on the side of political authoritarianism and not theocracy, because theocracy is, in my opinion, doesn't fit in the 21st century political atmosphere that we're living in. And when I impose theocracy and I say Sharia comes as the first jurisdiction, then this will negate the Syrian constitution. That's why democracy and theocracy, they don't come together. People try always to say, like, Islam is compatible with democracy. And I'm not attacking Islam at all. I'm just saying you're basically telling me communism and capitalism can, like, it's the same, like, it's just they can find a formula which communism and capitalism are implemented together. It can't. Because Islam is also a way of life. It teaches you how to, like, from waking up to eating to sleeping to all affairs, relationships, everything. And if a state comes and says we have our civil laws, which means that it's a jurisdiction written by a human being, for an Islamist, the Sharia, the Quran, comes of a higher importance. So there is a contradiction between Islamism and a civil society or civil state. Therefore, what is going to happen in Syria, they are not going to copy entire example of Idlib and the rest of Syria, because that would be so controversial in a country who has like 20 to 30% minorities. Like, unlike in Afghanistan, if you have the bigger percentage or the vast majority of the people from same color, it's easier to implement that. But in Syria, it's going to be light, like light Islamism. They're going to infiltrate first into the education system, changing the curriculum. And so they prepare the next generations to come demanding for an Islamic state, because you can indoctrinate people. You know very well that if you were born under communism, you might probably be brainwashed to be a communist. Or if you're born under an Islamic country, you may think that this is the best form of ruling, because this is how the education tells you in the country and the press and everything. So they're going to work on the long run. Their backers are very smart. Turkey and Qatar are not some random players in the region. They have a big project in the region, and they're going to implement this soft Islamic rule now, light, until the people are ready to accept an Islamic rule. And this is going to take a longer time, but it's also going to create lots of upheavals in the country, because look, Christians aren't going to accept it. Alawites aren't going to accept it. The Shiites aren't going to accept it. The Kurds aren't going to accept it. Yazidis, the Druze, Ismailis. We have over 20 different communities in Syria. They're not going to accept to live under Islamic State. So they have the choice either to like bow and accept the rule, or leave. And I think many people will leave. I'm already receiving many calls from Syria, people asking me if the asylum is open in Germany. And I think, I'm not sure 100%, I will ask tomorrow a lawyer, that they will open it only for minorities now. So they will help the resettlement of the minorities from Syria to the outside world, and give them asylum, and then integrate them and assimilate them into society, in order to softly ethnically cleanse the minorities from Syria and establish an Islamic State. So everybody is complicit in this. And Syria, as we know it, is gone forever. Anyone who comes and tells me like, Syria, no, wait, I see people posting on social media, I wish for the next system to be civil, to be civilized, to be secular. Like, bro, the people who carry out the arms and fight, they're the ones who are going to impose their solutions and the outcome. They didn't pay tens of thousands of their takfiris and jihadis for you to give you the political life on a plate of gold. No, they're going to rule it because they did the fighting, and this is just a normal rule in politics and in war. Whoever wins imposes his terms, and Jolani's people are the ones going to impose the terms, and not some liberal, democracy-loving activists and foreigners saying like, we wish for Syria the best and to thrive and to have an amazing future, and we wish them to have a democracy. No, it's not going to happen. We're not delusional and naive to think that Jolani is going to establish a democratic state. He may give the country some elections, but elections are not equal to democracy if you don't respect the human rights and press rights and give the people free and equal chances to participate in the political life. That's not democracy.
Yeah. Do you imagine Jolani ever stepping down and not being the leader of Syria while he's alive?
He will get killed, Kim. I'm 100% sure. He is a dead man walking, just like Osama bin Laden, just like Abu Bakr Baghdadi. This type of personalities, it's not like they don't come naturally. They don't come from the people. They are groomed to have a role. This is an intelligence work. And Jolani was necessary till now. And there is a $10 million bounty on his head. And rest assured, just like they killed Baghdadi and like killed Osama bin Laden, the US, you will see the next president, Trump, comes and stands in front of the podium and says, tonight we have taken surgical attacks and we have killed the terrorist Abu Bakr Jolani in Damascus or in Homs in somewhere. He will take the credit, and then they will throw his body somewhere in the ocean that nobody knows where he's killed. I mean, it's just repeating the same thing over and over again. It's become so boring for me. That's why today I took the decision like I'm going to leave Facebook completely. I'm not going to engage in these domestic affairs in Syria, because if people seriously cannot learn from the close history, just recently in Iraq and in Libya, and they want to repeat the same thing over and over again, okay, good for them. Let them enjoy this. I will just continue my foreign policy work, and I don't want to nose into the domestic affairs of Syria any longer. And good luck. And in the future, they will see what type of trap they have been stuck into. It's going to take only probably 3 years or 5 years.
I think best case scenario, Syria turns into Pakistan. So it would be like, and this is best case scenario, where yes, there's like a pretend democracy where they vote for pretend prime ministers or I don't know, what do they have, a prime minister or a president over there, that they jail. Every single one has been in prison. I think the one that was the soccer, who was the most famous one just recently, isn't he sitting in jail right now? All of them from all of them from Pakistan have been in jail at one point, or murdered, assassinated. But Pakistan is really run by the military. It's really, truly, they have this fake sort of look of democracy. But ultimately, when foreign leaders fly in to meet with Pakistan, they don't meet with the prime minister of Pakistan. They meet with the military. They meet with the generals. So I can see best case scenario, the West kind of having that vision for Syria, where it's, we'll kind of feign democracy here and there and kind of do some fun elections. But really, this HTS group is going to be the ones, as long as they play ball with the West, just like Pakistan, as long as they stay in and they'll fly to England and do their training in the UK, and they'll accept US money, and they'll be our puppets, then we will keep them somewhat stable. We'll allow some skirmishes, just like with Pakistan. They've got the area with India that's just slipping my mind
Kashmir.
right just here. Yes, Kashmir, which my previous guest was actually from there. But they've got this, so that they could keep the military weapons sales going. They could keep it somewhat unstable. They could keep it, there is a bit of that tension, but ultimately, that's the best case scenario I see for Syria. Obviously, worst case scenario is more endless war. The West turning on HTS suddenly after putting him in power, continuing to bomb the place, continuing to go after Syria, Israel marching in, taking more land, the people that are left behind in Syria falling to Islamic rule, to Sharia law, like the people in Idlib, and which, a lot of people like that. I mean, I'm not going to discount, there are a lot of people who are into Sharia. They prefer that as their lifestyle. That, of course, it has a level of support, but not everybody supports that. And it's the minorities, of course, the majority is going to support it in certain areas, but the minority, the question is what happens to the minorities, and they're forced either out of the country to flee, like you mentioned, or they're forced into it. I was reading through a lot of forums from people living in Idlib and doing a lot of translation, and people asking, what's life been like there? And, a lot of them say, look, it's better now. Yes, we're forced to wear the hijab. Yes, we're segregated men to women. Yes, women are more, women aren't able to do as much, but it's better because there's not as much violence. I think, so that's one thing, is that if there is a stabilization and lack of violence, people will tolerate living in like a Handmaid's Tale style environment as long as they're safe, right? They'll put up with ultra conservatism or even ultra liberalism, whatever it is, as long as they feel that's better than being bombed to death. I mean, it is,
yeah,
right?
So we replace authoritarianism. So we replace authoritarianism, which already secures or gives security to the people and safety, with another type of authoritarianism, with this time more religious authoritarianism. That's why I say it's not a progress. I mean, the situation in Idlib is like, look, in Syria, under Assad, you were free to wear the niqab, completely even block your eyes, nobody can see you. Into exactly the opposite side. You can wear a miniskirt in the street, and rest assured, if somebody comes closer to you, then you will see like a social, like random men in the street coming to protect a woman who might have been harassed. There is this social control in the country that women cannot be touched. So you were able to live this and that. So if you're an Islamist and you want to live an Islamic life, and not to impose your values on the rest, then you could live freely. But under HTS in Idlib, you must cover your head. And today I saw a school photo from secondary school in Idlib. Everybody is wearing a niqab, not even a hijab. And
Right.
I'm very wary because Syria is we're talking about one of the early civilizations of humanity, and this is where agriculture started, writing, and many inventions that nowadays we take it for granted. This was the root started from there, and it developed. They were like a woman ruler of Syria, right? Zanubia in Palmyra. We had so many different civilizations, and just summarizing everything into this one particular group, it doesn't make sense for me, because Syria needs to have a government which gives equal opportunity for all, and not one group
Right.
comes and imposes its religious beliefs. Now, under Assad, it was a political oppression, right? Like, if you are a Muslim, Christian, anything, infidel, he doesn't care. As long as your loyalty is for the regime, they don't care, and they give you lots of opportunities if you are loyal. Like, it's not based on sect or religion. But this system that is going to be built now, it's going to be religious. It's going to be sectarian. From the flag behind the current so-called prime minister of Syria, it's quite obvious. It's the same flag of a Taliban anyways, and they're sending already the vibes. And this is not the Syria that I belong to, you know, and in any ways, they don't even consider me Syrian because I'm an ethnic Armenian. I was born and raised in Syria. For them, I'm not even considered the Syrian. They say I have to go back to Armenia. But in any ways, even if they accept me, like my security in Syria, and even my parents, like it has become it's gravely dangerous, you know.
Right.
I don't want to send back my parents or go back there and live just like nothing happened. No, it's a big change, a big shift, and I think we deserve so much better than this.
You're absolutely right, Kevork. I'm sorry this happened to your country. I'm sorry this has happened to your family. Having to flee your country is not easy. I know my family did it, and it's not easy, but hopefully they'll find safety and opportunity somewhere else, hopefully somewhere beautiful and warm and safe. And I don't know where they're going, but hopefully it's great. And Kevork, thank you so much for giving us a bit of insight into this. I think that you clarified quite a bit for us. And you know, it's crazy right now watching the West, the media, like you say, kind of whitewash this guy's history and act like, oh, head chopping was his phase in the past. It's fine, no big deal. And Syria is going to be great in the hands of these Sharia law. You know, people that are going to enact Sharia law across the country, and that should have been their biggest clue right there when they say, yeah, we're going to be moderate, but then they put Mohammed al-Bashir, the guy who has, you know, like you said, he's like his whole thing is Sharia. And they make him the prime minister of the place. It's like that should have been the clue right there, that they don't have any intention of keeping the place secular. Now it's not only going to be a religious persecution, not only is it going to be probably political persecution. We're already seeing that with all of the executions and whatnot, but it's also going to be religious on top of that. So it will be worse for the people ultimately, but maybe better if the violence stops. But I'm not holding my breath for that. I'm not holding my breath for that.
I don't build my expectations on hopes. I truly hope, like I truly wish for the Syrian people peace, but I'm not naive. And I see that all these weapons in the hands of the crazies in the streets, including multinational jihadists from all around the world, like with the Uyghurs, from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Saudi Arabia, they are just roaming around with their PKCs and their AK-47s, and they're shooting in the air, and they are basically going into Christian neighborhoods and asking people, what religion are you? And I mean, this type of things we have never witnessed in Syria before. And I don't think under such militants, Syria can see light again. Therefore, I'm not optimistic. I'm pessimistic. I wish the best for the Syrian people, and I would love to see them thrive. But I'm not naive, and I think that this is going to be a very difficult path for them.
Okay, so you said that you've deleted your Facebook, but your show, Syriana Analysis, your channel, are you still going to be talking about Syria?
Yes, I will only focus on foreign affairs of Syria with the region, definitely. But I'm sure that when Syria is over, the people igniting these wars, they will find some other spot to ignite a war because that's how they make money. So unfortunately speaking, wars will never stop. This is in the nature of how they make their wealth, basically.
Yeah.
Therefore, I expect that they will flare the fires in some other places. So we have to be awake and also try to report about these wars even before it happens. If we can expect them and also waken up more people, that would be amazing, because this is the job that I would like to do for life. I don't want them to suffer like I suffered. That's why I do what I do. This is my motivation. I wake up, I want to tell the people the truth that I believe is the truth, and I want to tell them to waken up more people, open up the eyes so that they push against this type of wars and not to be fooled by the narratives. And I mean, if I ask probably now 100 people in Germany, maybe 90 of them would tell me like, oh, nice, the Assad dictator is gone. Right? Because this is what they're told by the press. If you turn on your
Right.
TV, even in Germany, it's crazy. They're
Yeah.
celebrating. Like, and they
Yeah.
don't tell what is HTS. So
Kevork, thank you so much for joining us. The link is down below to Syriana Analysis, your own channel, which you do. How often do you do a show?
I'm doing daily between Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern American time, always on YouTube and Rumble.
Okay, well, that link is down below, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of follows, people wanting to know more
Thank you.
about what's going on in the Middle East. So, Kevork, thank you so much.